A bit of a wet blanket on the Boston Celtics Game 1 win over the Philadelphia 76ers. A late fourth quarter injury to Gordon Hayward, a right ankle sprain that had him leaving the facilities in a crutches and a boot. I'm Sierra Goodwill, here with Jimmy Toscano and Josue. Guys, a good win for the Celtics overall, but it seems like this has really overshadowed the good news. Is another injury for Hayward in game 1 of the playoffs. Not the same ankle that he broke in that gruesome injury a couple of years ago against Cleveland, but still concerning nonetheless. Brad Stevens saying after the game that he was in pain and there seemed to be swelling right away. How concerning is this right off the bat, Jimmy?
From 1 to 10, probably like an 11, I would say, somewhere around there. Not good.
Accurate.
I mean, I'm not breaking any hot opinions here, hot takes. I mean, for Brad to come out and say those things right off the bat, he could have said, we don't know. I haven't seen him. I haven't talked to him. Doctors are still looking. But no, he was basically like, yeah, it sucks. Like, he's in a lot of pain. It's not looking good. And then to see, Gary Washburn's tweet stating that, he left the arena in crutches and a boot. Like, we were talking about on the postgame show, like, I mean, at minimum, we're looking at like 2 weeks. And that's like, feels like, we don't know. I mean, he could wake up tomorrow, maybe it's a miracle or something, but it just feels like based on what we're seeing and hearing, it feels like it's going to be a good stretch of time. The games are compacted in. And then on top of that, his wife's due in like 10 days. So that's coming at an inopportune time. So, I mean, does this guy just fly home tomorrow and try to get better and stay home for the birth of his daughter and then try to get back for the second round at the end of it if they make it there? I don't know. It kind of sucks, like, because the Celtics just won the first game and you want to be happy and they looked good, but now like a huge piece of that success and that team is now going to be watching like the rest of us from the sidelines. So it's tough.
Yeah, no question, Jimmy. It's a huge blow for the Celtics team. He was the guy who's been bridging the gap between the first unit and the second. We've been talking about it on and on, how important he is for that second unit. And of course, how consistent he's been all season long. His comeback season comes to an end, comes down to this. Barring a deep playoff run, I really don't think you're going to see Gordon Hayward. I mean, to Jimmy's point, when you couple his wife going into labor soon, the 4 days of quarantine, I mean, we talked about it before the playoffs started. That's potentially 2 to 3 playoff games in itself. And then you pile on the injury, the recovery, and the rehab. I'm thinking if the Celtics make it to the NBA Finals, that's when you'll see Gordon Hayward. And that's probably the more realistic way to look at it when we're talking about the Celtics being more precautious and, of course, taking care of Gordon Hayward, who's had a past with injury past and was just, in the stride of the best Gordon Hayward we've seen throughout his tenure with the Celtics.
Gordon Hayward getting an MRI Monday night following the game, so we don't quite know the timetable or the official diagnosis just yet, but we're going to talk about just how big of a loss this is. As you guys have mentioned, he was playing really, really well in those 8 seeded games leading up to the playoffs, and it seemed like finally all the Celtics' top pieces were healthy, and we were seeing the final product, something we never really got to see for most of the regular season. It always seemed like one piece of the puzzle was out with some sort of injury or illness. And now it happens again, game 1 of the playoffs. Who fills his role, and how big of a loss is this in terms of just mojo and the flow that the Celtics are in right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's – you go, Josue.
All right, I'll go.
No, I insist. You go.
I think you divvy up the majority of his minutes between Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart. And I know that's not, it's like obviously, duh, right? I mean, those two guys are going to be the ones that have to plug in, that Brad Stevens has to plug in. But, I mean, if we're talking about playing over 40 minutes, that could be the new norm for someone like Jaylen Brown. And I think Jaylen Brown skill set, is probably the closest you're going to get in terms of being that sort of flexible guy on both ends of the floor that we've gotten from Gordon Hayward. I mean, that's your best bet. You want to have the Romeo conversation, we can have it all you want, but realistically, 6-7 minutes tops. I mean, Romeo is just not going to be a guy, or another guy like Romeo is not going to be a guy who's just going to take on 15, 16 minutes in the middle of a playoff series. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I'm not high on Romeo really doing a whole lot in these playoffs, especially with his injury. Talking about guys with injuries, he's one that has one as well. So I'm more likely to see Shemi out there, to spot some minutes, play some defense. It's situational. I mean, if the Celtics are up, or if they're up, you don't necessarily need 5 guys who can score the bucket. And Shemi might be a guy that can hold a lead. You know, he can switch on defense. He could probably, you know, do pretty well in Tobias Harris, right? I mean, Tobias Harris is a guy that can get open and score. You know, at times he can score with the best of them. So, you know, a guy like Shemi who's strong, he can switch onto guys. And I think he didn't play at all game one. Kind of surprising. Thought maybe he'd get a little burned, but he's a guy that Brad has turned to in many situations in the past when in times of need, and he's a guy that he trusts. And I fully expect to see him out there game two. Jaylen Brown, yeah, of course. If you can get 40 out of Jaylen and 35, 40 out of Smart, obviously, like, you're going to need these guys to dig deep. But there's 35 minutes that you have to make up from Gordon Hayward. That's 35 minutes that you have to make up. Those two guys are not going to make up all those 35 minutes. So you're going to have to go into the bench. Maybe Grant plays a few more minutes. But, again, I'm not super high on him right now either.
I was going to say Grant Williams. I can see him playing a few more minutes in Hayward's absence. He played less than 5 minutes. I think he played around 2 minutes in game one, but they were a good 2 minutes. He had a solid showing. He had some major plays at an opportune time for the Celtics to get them back on track. So we might be seeing some more Williams later on in this series. But for all of our Celtics playoff coverage, you can find it on our website at clnsmedia.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Celtics All Access.